and we're here and we're back on the podcast, and we're here to help you as a business to build a brand that lives up to your promise. And Mr. Jed G. Morley is here to help us do that. He's the founder and the CEO of Backstory Branding, and he also has a book that's about to come out called Building a Brand That Scales. So that way you can unlock the hidden value of your brand and business and get this messaging to be clear and tell your story and help your company stand out, resonate with the right customers, and accelerate growth. Like a tall order, but you can do it by getting your story straight so that way you can scale, because clarity equals growth. And so Mr. Jed is here to help us clarify and articulate and codify all these different things, our purpose, our value, and our culture. That way we can achieve so much more and just not make things so hard on ourselves and achieve some greatness. So Mr. Jed, glad to see you. Glad to be speaking with you.
Great to be with you, Robert.
And so what did I leave out there? I introduced you, spoke a little bit about your bio, but what are you all about? What's your current focus and passion?
My wife and I had a bucket list trip a couple of years ago. We went to Florence, Italy, and we were excited to see the David. The thing that was even more interesting, though, was when we were walking down the corridor towards this larger-than-life statue. It's 17 feet high. It's beautiful. It kind of blows your mind how finessed and polished and perfect it is. You wonder, how could someone possibly have created that? There are unfinished sculptures from Michelangelo, and they call those the stone prisoners. And those prisoners are stuck, half revealed. He never got to finish those works of art. And so many times we find founders and CEOs who are leading companies that have done part of the work to reveal the full value of their brand and business. We see it as our role and responsibility to remove anything that isn't the statue that's inside, that's trapped inside this lack of clarity and inconsistent messaging and positioning. And we'd like to reveal the full glory of the business and brand to unlock that hidden value.
Very nice. Follow through, right? And sometimes we need a little bit of extra help to get there. We've all had that coach or that mentor, accountability partner, therapist, boss manager, whatever, someone else to help us get to that finish line. And so as far as someone being one of those companies, those brands that say like, I'm on my way, but I haven't quite finished the statue, like where do you think people are stuck right now? Where does the hurt exist?
We see a lot of people who get stuck in the echo chamber. And what I mean by that is they listen to their own ideas and assumptions instead of testing and finding out what customers think and feel about their business and brand. We can't emphasize enough the importance of insights to inform a well-crafted brand strategy that sets you apart in a way that's relevant to your audiences. To do that, you've got to spend time listening to customers and testing your assumptions. And there's a specific methodology we practice called message market fit that says, let's articulate your hypothetical messaging. Let's take your assumptions and put those in front of customers and find out what words resonate or not and why. And when you co-create the refined version and iterate through that build, measure, learn cycle that Eric Ries and others have popularized through the lean startup movement, and apply that not just to product market fit, but to message market fit, you find that you can tune and align your message in a way that resonates and delights your customers.
Very cool and very important and underrated and perhaps a little bit uncomfortable, right? And like whenever this idea comes out, the place my brain always goes is comedians testing out their material, right? You can be the funniest person, you could be Jerry Seinfeld and think, okay, got this really good joke, but even the best ones, they still go out and they take their material on tour and they still try it out because, man, the reality of life in the outside world, it messes with you, right? Our brains aren't big enough to have any idea what people want or the timing. And so I imagine that a lot of these companies you work with, right? You work with BambooHR, Consensus Grow, Lucidchart, and like where do they maybe have pushback and resistance to your ideas? You say, well, here's what you should do. Here's the message market fit. But then, as you know, you can say, hey, here's what I think you should do. But then they don't always maybe want to do it, or they have trouble getting there. So like, what are the difficulties in implementing this framework that you have?
We find that one of the challenges companies have in doing this work is that they've got day jobs. And it's tough to set aside the pressure of the immediate need, the crisis of the moment, to do the strategic work and the deep work necessary to unpack and uncover unlock the insights that will connect you to your best customers. In the case of Lucidchart, Dave Groh, who's the CEO of the company, engaged us to help him reverse engineer and deconstruct why customers were buying their software. And the reason why they did this exercise was to be able to sell enterprise licenses. We did over 65 interviews in collaboration with their product team to understand why customers had a problem that triggered the need to search for a solution like Lucidchart. And when we unpacked all of the answers we got in response to these conversations, what we found was that Lucidchart was relevant to these different audiences within large enterprise companies for different reasons. So when you go onto Lucidchart's website today, under the Solutions tab, you see audience-specific value propositions and messages that came from this work we did together. That allows Lucidchart to be relevant not just to the corporate buyers, but to the users within those organizations so that those customers will see more value in their subscriptions and licenses to Lucidchart and renew long term. And that's why they've scaled to be over $100 million in annual recurring revenue today. They found a way to not only do the high level umbrella company messaging, but also to do the audience specific messaging with each functional area within the company.
Well, I like your scientific approach to this, where you're saying, like, there's some kind of like, there's a setting aside the day job of it, because we all have fires to put out, right? We all have day to day, and someone might say, oh, well, updating my branding messaging, oh, it's not such a priority, right? I have all these deadlines, all these goals I have to get to, and you're like, well, you need to kind of find the time or get a little bit additional resources in order to fix this up. And I like your approach there. You said you had these 65 interviews, and it's seeking the problem, figuring out, well, for all these people and what specifically where they were stuck without the solution, and then how they use Lucidchart, and you kind of take all that data and come up with something amazing. And there's definitely value in that. And even like what we're doing here right at this moment, Mr. Jed, right? We're doing kind of a one-on-one question and answer, and it kind of is a little time consuming, right? I can imagine it can be a little tedious to show up on lots of podcasts, but that's where you get the good stuff from, right? That's where you get someone else kind of asking questions about them. And so that way you're not focused on the features of your own product. It's like, hey, Lucidchart works really well for this person and that problem. And that's way more of what we want, right? If we say, hey, I want this solution, it's about me. It's not about this product. And so I can imagine that you have this system that works really, really well, and it's helped a lot of brands. And then when you make a book, it's like, hey, now here's my statue that's set in stone, right? Here's this thing that I can hand out to people and say, hey, here's a great starting point and what I'm all about. And this book is called Building a Brand That Scales. And so can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, why did you make it? How does it stand out?
Book because it is an opportunity for people who are curious to better understand how to build a brand that grows with their business, to anticipate what the brand wants to be when it grows up, and to systematically create a brand strategy that closes the gap between their current perception, let's call that P1, and their desired perception, that's P2. And when you can be strategic about answering those questions, what do we want to be when we're fully realized in our vision? It can help you create a brand platform and foundation that can scale with your business. Instead of having to rebrand or refresh, you can go the full distance with a single brand that accrues more equity to your business without having to retool mid hockey stick.
And we all want that brand that grows up, right? And we want it to get somewhere. And as part of that process, you mentioned earlier about the echo chamber. I can imagine there's a lot of just maybe like when it's like when you think about something too much, right? You think too much about like comedy or music, you lose the magic, right? You lose the unknown about it. And is that a fear? Like if someone kind of over analyzes or is over scientific about this whole branding storytelling thing, is there a danger of it being just kind of too formulaic, too cookie cutter?
I like what you raised there, Robert, in terms of it being part science and part art. You can take the analysis too far. And like you said, with comedians have instincts and intuition, and then they test the the material in smaller size clubs before they take it onto the main stage. And every time they present something, they're getting feedback and iterating, but it's still their art, it's still their craft. They have to be true to themselves. In a like way or similar fashion, behind every great brand is a great leader. Somebody has to say yes to an idea that's different. You think about Just Do It. Today, it's a no-brainer. But at some point, Scott Bedbury, the head of marketing for Nike at the time, bet all of his career capital on backing that idea. And it was a bold concept that no one had really tried before, to do brand marketing like that in such a big, bold way. So behind every great brand is a great leader. Somebody has to greenlight the idea that's different. To support the difference, you can find data, but it ultimately comes down to good judgment. And we find the most successful brands are the ones that have the most daring leaders behind them that blend the best of data with intuition.
Ooh, I like that a lot. How so? There's like multiple ingredients at play, right? There's the data and there's the intuition, and you have a leader who provides good judgment. And so now you have me really curious about the qualities of a leader, right? There's different people that they don't have it, but it can be learned, and people that do have it, and perhaps they need to get more in tune of what they're doing right. That way they can do it better or do more of it. And so all of these companies that you've dealt with, you've talked and met with amazing people and storytellers, etc. Like, what do you think is a good leader? Like, who have you seen that really just exemplifies these good values?
Great leaders stay close to the people who are consuming what they produce. And those conversations that they have with the people who are on the front lines interacting and interfacing with customers the most can really inform their instincts and their strategic wayfinding. And the example that comes to mind for me is one with a company called Claravine. Verl Allen had worked at Adobe. He understood the advertising world really well, having grown up through Omniture, which was acquired by Adobe. And he saw a problem, an inefficiency. And that's really what entrepreneurs do. They find things that are inefficient in the world and they say, we could solve that. We could make that more streamlined and close that gap and create a lot of value in the process. The challenge with Claravine is that they serve a lot of different audiences. Think of it as like a Rubik's Cube. Before the Rubik's Cube is solved, you've got 6 different colors, you've got all the different sides of the cube, and 9 tiles per side. So if you're an orange-oriented audience, Robert, and I show you a mixture of colors, and there's just one of the 9 tiles that's orange on that side of the messaging cube for you, how relevant is that going to be?
Not
Not
much.
very. There's a lot of noise and not enough signal. So solving that messaging matrix or puzzle so that we're showing you purely relevant messages, a solid orange side of the story, requires that as a leader, you continue to be humble and teachable and open to new inputs so that you can constantly tune the messaging to resonate with every audience. That's the challenge for most B2B brands. They serve multiple audiences with multiple offerings. Knowing when to pivot and show that side of the story to that audience requires a lot of listening. And leaders who are most attuned to listening are the ones who ultimately have the biggest breakthroughs. In the case of Claravine, Verl trusted the process. He already had a strong sense of who the company was, what they did, and why it mattered. And yet it was taking 30 minutes to explain the story. So he engaged us and we walked the company through a process that included learning the internal perception of the brand and testing that against what customers said. We did 20 interviews based on the number of segments they had. That was the appropriate number. And on the 18th out of 20 interviews, I was talking to an SVP at a big media company. And midway through the conversation, he said, I'm no copywriter, but to me, what Claravine does is they take the drama out of the data, meaning that when you don't have a consistent naming nomenclature for advertising data, you can't make real-time decisions on marketing campaigns. And that's the problem that Claravine solves. So now when you go onto the Claravine website, you see on the homepage, front and center, take the drama out of your marketing data. Was that my idea? It wasn't necessarily. It was inspired by a conversation that Verl allowed to happen because he had to have the humility to say, there might be something I'm missing. There might be a better way to communicate this. And so he trusted the process, and we were able to uncover an insight to unlock the whole Claravine brand. Now, no matter who you are, whether you're a large or small company, whether you're the head of marketing or someone who's buying pay-per-click ads, you're able to relate to and connect with that overarching brand promise of Claravine. Take the drama out of your marketing data by creating consistent naming conventions and data standards across data sets. That's the beauty of a leader who's open to new insights and trusts the process and embraces it when they hear the truth, even if it's just one data point that makes all the difference.
Well, very cool. And people need to hear this, right? And we need to be reminded of this idea that listening is important and being willing to accept when you were wrong or made wrong assumptions or had incomplete data. And then it's time to pivot and go and do all of these right things. And as a podcast host, you're giving me exactly what I want, right? You're giving me fun stories and visualizations and little ahas and demonstrating of your worth and your value. And it's really great just to have instead of the facts and figures, you give it to me in a much more exciting, enjoyable format. And speaking of stories, the best stories are the ones where it's not straightforward, right? Where there's a conflict, or there's a struggle partway through. And it's always great to have someone here who can be open and raw about what they've gone through. And so as far as where you've had your own struggles, right? Personal or business or entrepreneurial or whatever, like what do you have to share or unpack there? Like where have you maybe had some challenges?
Modern marketing is largely driven by data and analytics. And what that translates into for a lot of SaaS companies is marketing automation. Marketing automation means that you're going to be implementing some kind of a system that allows you to send email drips and to measure conversions through the funnel, through marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads and sales accepted leads. I understand those concepts, but for me, my gifts and talents lie more with strategic brand positioning and messaging. And what kept happening for me in my career is I would help companies get their story straight, to clarify their brand positioning and strategic messaging and do all of that audience specific marketing messaging development. And they would say, thank you so much. Now we're going to have these other people execute the strategy to take that framework to market. And that meant that I was out of a job because most companies don't need brand strategy messaging every day. It's a muscle, it's an aptitude, a talent that very few CMOs and other kinds of digitally minded marketers have had the chance to develop and hone over their careers. So I decided to, instead of continuing to get let go after I had cracked the code on the brand strategy for companies like BambooHR and Consensus, which went on to have great success and spoke well of what I had contributed to their journey, I decided to do brand strategy and messaging full time. So I took my strengths and turned them into a new way of adding value to the full marketing ecosystem. And it's been a great ride over these past 8 years.
Well, very cool. You found something that works, right? You adapted just like the rest of us have to adapt. And as far as all these concepts that we've been discussing, right? These ideas of branding and storytelling and getting the data and applying the intuition. Like I'm thinking there must be a really good question that applies here that I just don't know to ask you because you're the expert and I just met you. So in this conversation we're having, is there a missing, hidden, invisible question that I should be asking you, I just don't know what to ask you?
Sometimes we make the mistake in marketing today of saying we're either going to do brand marketing or performance marketing. Performance marketing is all about generating revenue and measuring everything and attributing it to the source of where a lead came from and why it converted. That's really important. It's equally important to build a brand and to develop equity so that you stand for something bigger than your latest transaction and so that you don't follow the race to the bottom by being too promotional or deal oriented. So, how do you combine the best of both worlds? We like to think of it as a swirl ice cream cone. Brand marketing is the chocolate, performance marketing is the vanilla. How can we swirl the best of both worlds to create a complete picture? And the way we do that is through the backstory brand wheel framework. And you can take a free assessment on our website to see your readiness to go to market with clarity and consistency at scale by taking our brand assessment. You'll get a color coded output that shows whether you understand the inner circle of your brand, the brand foundation, where we address things like brand purpose, brand position, promise, pillars, your 5 biggest differentiators and benefits, and brand personality. The next ring out is brand expression, defining your audiences, your ICPs, your personas, and the messages that resonate with them. And on the outer ring is brand performance. And that's where we go to market with a website, with traffic, with funnels, with the collateral and the presentations and content that everyone thinks of when they think of marketing. Really, you need all of it. So it's not either or, it's and.
I like it. There's a whole map, right? There's all these little pieces to solve for, and they all interconnect. And where can someone go and take that assessment?
They can go to backstorybranding.com and click on the brand assessment dropdown, and it's right there on our website.
Very nice, very cool. Backstorybranding.com. You click on the button to take that assessment, and I like to make a mental note when I go to a website, and I really like the look of it. I like the bright colors and the big text. It's one of those where it's like, cool, that's what a website is supposed to look like, right? It's way too easy for a website to look like dated or kind of awkward, but I'm making a mental note. It really stands out. I really like it. So we have backstorybranding.com, and then you also have this book called Building a Brand That Scales, which explains the process of creating and activating a brand that can grow with your business. And we already mentioned the book a little bit, but just as kind of a little bit of a final push, like why should someone get that book right now or as soon as they listen to this podcast? Like what's the urgency to be had to check out this book?
Anyone who wants to build a successful business has to have a business strategy. And to accomplish those business growth objectives, you got to have an effective brand strategy. This book teaches you how to build an effective brand strategy and activate it by walking you through each of the four phases of building and activating your brand, including brand discovery, brand foundation, brand expression, and brand activation. It encapsulates all of the principles that we found to be effective in working over dozens of brands and industries and helping companies go from 5 to 50 million to between 5 and 50 million to 100 million or more. So really it's a handbook on how to scale a business and brand to unlock hidden value.
Very cool. To get to that next step. And, when I first started hearing about some of these ideas like branding in like early 2000s, it was all this vague stuff, right? It was all this like colors on your website and keywords. But luckily now we live in this day and age where things are more civilized and optimized and built up, and there are actual frameworks that exist, such as on your website, backstorybranding.com, where someone can take that assessment, and such as in your book, Building a Brand That Scales, because Mr. Jed Morley says that building a brand is a purpose-driven process that blends the best of brand and performance marketing, and it requires alignment between your vision and your customers' wants and needs. So those are two amazing resources for us to check out. There's Building a Brand That Scales, and there's backstorybranding.com, where you can take that assessment. And before I let you go, Mr. Jed, it's time for the scary part of the podcast where I try to stump you and I ask for a quote or lesson that has served you that you can pass on to us. So what do you have for a quote or lesson?
The essence of branding is making and keeping a meaningful promise.
Trust, right? Very
It's
nice.
trust.
So make and keep that meaningful promise. And if you don't know how to do that, that's okay. Ask for help, such as from Mr. Jed Morley and that team at backstorybranding.com. And check out the book on Amazon, Building a Brand That Scales. As founder and CEO of Backstory Branding, Mr. Jed Morley draws upon years of experience creating brand breakthroughs, and he expertly demonstrates the power of building a brand that clarifies your purpose, articulates your value, and codifies your culture. And that's also that way you can maximize the value of your business and achieve amazing things. And thank you very much, Mr. Jed, for showing up, stopping by, giving us some amazing stories and ideas, insights, things to do, tasks. And I really appreciate you being here and delivering what you delivered. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. It was great being with you.